The doctor sat, rigid, in the hard-backed chair, the leather groaning beneath him. Across the desk, the older physician, the one everyone in town whispered about, glanced over the chart with deliberate slowness. The office smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. A clock ticked somewhere behind a cracked panel. "You'll never be a father," the man said, his voice flat, almost casual, as if reading a grocery list instead of delivering a verdict. The words landed like stones in the doctor's chest. He said nothing. His hands clenched, relaxed, clenched again. He nodded, a single, hollow jerk of his head, and turned his gaze toward the muted sunlight that filtered through the blinds. There was no anger, no protest, only the quiet of someone hearing the weight of a sentence they could not appeal. The older physician shuffled papers. I know it's hard." "Most men," the doctor cut him off with a slow shake. "I understand," he said, voice low, controlled, hollow. He didn't understand. Not really. Not yet. The drive home was silent. Dust rose from the rutted dirt roads, clinging to the tires, the shoes, the edges of his coat. Houses passed in a blur of white paint and peeling shutters. Neighbors waved, unaware, oblivious to the storm curling tight in his chest. He waved back, stiff, polite, but the gesture felt alien. He parked by the edge of his property, a modest clapboard house that had seen better days, and he sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the faded mailbox. The sun sank lower. Shadows grew long across the yard. Inside, the house was dark, silent. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, feeling the emptiness of the rooms press in like water. He walked through the kitchen, the scent of old pine and cooked meals lingering in the corners. Everything was as he had left it that morning, untouched, waiting. He sat at the worn wooden table, hands folded, staring at the cracks in the tabletop. His reflection caught in the window. Hollow eyes, tight jaw, skin pale from the long hours in the clinic. He remembered the faces of patients, the gratitude in their eyes when he treated them, when he delivered news of life saved. That respect now felt like a cruel joke. He had spent years healing others, delivering life into the world, and yet here he was, told he would never produce a life of his own. The envelope with the medical report rested on the table, the paper stiff, official. He picked it up once, turned it over, then set it down. His fingers hovered above it, tracing the edges without opening it. He could not bear the words, the numbers, the conclusions, and yet he could not stop himself. He slid the envelope into a drawer and locked it. The drawer clicked shut, the key turned in the lock. No one would see this. No one would know. It was his secret, his punishment, and he would carry it alone. Evening bled into night. He lit the lamp beside the table, the warm yellow circle, a poor imitation of comfort. He moved through the house methodically, locking doors, drawing curtains, shutting out the world. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the road. A car rattled along the uneven path, headlights slicing the darkness for a moment, then gone. He listened to the quiet. The quiet answered back. In the small bathroom, he ran water over his hands. He stared at the reflection in the mirror, tracing the lines on his face. Fatigue, sorrow, disbelief. He closed his eyes. The room smelled faintly of soap and rust. He rinsed his hands again, letting the water run a little longer, as if he could wash the weight off. Nothing changed. He moved to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged slightly, the sheets neat, untouched. He thought of what might have been, names, tiny shoes, laughter echoing in hallways. The future he had imagined folded inward and vanished. He sat there, still listening to the house settle, the wind brushing against the roof. His chest tightened with something close to grief, but not quite. It was deeper, older. He pressed his palms to his eyes, swallowed, and let the tears burn behind his eyelids without falling. Finally, he returned to the drawer. He touched the locked envelope again, a silent vow forming in the small space between his fingers and the key. No one would see this. No one would mock him. No one would know. He would carry it, alone, like he had carried everything else. The lamp flickered. Outside, the world continued, unaware, indifferent. He exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, and sat in the silence. Heavier than grief, colder than sorrow. Waiting for a night that felt like it might never end. The house was silent when the knock came. It echoed across the empty hall, sharp and urgent, bouncing off the walls lined with faded family photographs and worn furniture. The doctor froze, hand on the doorknob, eyes narrowing. The sound came again, harder this time. He muttered under his breath, "Who the hell?" and opened the door just a crack. A boy stood there, shoulder deep in dust and grime, eyes wide, hands trembling. "Doctor, they told me you'd help," he whispered, voice barely above the wind rustling through the trees. The doctor stared at him, the dim porch light revealing his thin frame and ragged clothes. "Go home," the doctor said, harsh, stepping back. "Now?" The boy's bottom lip trembled. "Ain't got one." The words fell like stones. He said nothing for a long moment, watching the child sway slightly on his feet. Outside, the night pressed in, stars hidden behind a low, rolling fog. The doctor pulled open the door wider, glare sharp. "What do you want here?" The boy shuffled, kicking at the dirt. "Food, water, please." He didn't flinch at the tone, didn't argue, just waited. The doctor hesitated, a long pause where neither moved, the sound of the wind slipping through the cracks in the porch boards filling the space. Finally, he sighed and stepped aside. Inside, one step. The boy's face brightened just slightly. He stepped over the threshold, boots scuffing the wooden floor, and the door closed behind him with a soft thud that sounded louder than it should have. The kitchen smelled faintly of old wood and something lingering, like stale coffee. The doctor moved to the stove, lighting it carefully, while the boy hovered near the doorway, eyes darting from the worn counters to the flickering shadows on the walls. "Sit," the doctor said, nodding toward a chair. The boy obeyed, knees pulled to his chest. "What's your name?" the doctor asked without looking at him. "Eli," the boy said, voice quiet, barely audible over the hiss of the stove. The doctor's shoulders tensed. "Parents?" he asked, flat. Eli swallowed. "Don't ask," he muttered, eyes down. The doctor didn't push. He filled a bowl with stew he'd kept for himself, scooping carefully. He set it on the table and motioned. "Eat." Eli dove in, small hands trembling. He chewed quickly, hungrily, as if the food might disappear at any moment. The doctor watched, silent, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Minutes passed. The only sound was the scrape of spoons on metal, the low hum of the stove, and the occasional gasp as Eli swallowed too fast. Where'd you sleep?" the doctor asked finally. "Outside," Eli said. "In the barn, on hay." The doctor's jaw tightened. "All night," Eli nodded. "The wind, it bites." He rubbed his arms, shivering. The doctor wanted to say something sharp, a warning to leave, to stay away, but the words wouldn't form. He simply moved to the pantry and brought out a blanket, setting it on the floor beside the table. "Here," he said. Eli glanced at it, hesitation in his eyes. For you," the doctor said. "Tonight." He didn't add anything else. Eli's body seemed to fold into the blanket, curling tightly, eyes heavy, lips pressed together as exhaustion claimed him. The doctor pulled up a chair nearby and sat, watching. Every sound breath, small sighs, the creak of the floorboards felt louder in the still house. He wanted to tell the boy to leave, wanted to return to the silence, the solitude, but he couldn't. Something in the way the child shivered, the way the light played across his thin arms, kept him rooted. He felt the weight of his own grief, his own silence, pressing against him, mixing with the boy's fear, creating a strange, fragile connection in the dark kitchen. The night grew heavier. Outside, the wind pushed through the trees, carrying the faint sound of distant animals and the hollow quiet of empty streets. Inside, the warmth from the stove and the small flicker of the lamp created a fragile island of light. Eli's breathing slowed, deep and even, and at last, he slept. The doctor remained in the chair, hand resting on the back of it, eyes fixed on the boy. His mind replayed the words he had heard only hours before. "You'll never be a father." And now, in this quiet, memory-haunted house, with a boy curled on the floor, he realized how sharply those words cut, yet how fragilely, impossibly, hope had begun to take root. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply watched, alone, the silence of the house broken only by the soft, steady breathing of the child at his feet. The kitchen smelled faintly of burned coffee and old wood. The doctor moved quietly, scraping eggs into the pan, the sizzle sharp in the otherwise silent room. Eli sat on the edge of the chair, hunched over, elbows on knees, watching every motion with wide eyes. His clothes hung loosely, frayed at the edges, dust still clinging to his sleeves. The doctor flipped the eggs, stirred the grits, and kept his hand steady, even though his stomach tightened. He wanted the silence, the control, but the boy's presence made it impossible. He set plates on the table, steam curling upward, the warmth filling the small room in a fragile, temporary comfort. Eli's eyes flicked between the food and the doctor, hesitant, as if he expected it to vanish before he could touch it. "Name?" the doctor asked finally, voice low, measured. "Eli," the boy said, barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, grabbing a fork, stabbing at the eggs like he'd never seen food before. "Parents?" the doctor asked, keeping his eyes on the grits as he spooned them onto the plate. "Don't ask," Eli muttered, shoulders tensing. His fingers shook slightly as he lifted the fork. The doctor didn't press. Silence stretched, punctuated only by the scraping of metal against porcelain and the faint hiss from the stove. "You can't stay," the doctor said abruptly, breaking the fragile quiet. It's not safe. You don't belong here." Eli froze, mid-bite fork hovering. "You're all I got," he said, voice trembling, eyes darting to the doctor. He swallowed quickly, as if the words themselves could fill the hollow space in his chest. The doctor's hand paused over the spoon. He wanted to respond, to tell him to leave, to return to the emptiness he had known before the knock at the door. But he didn't. The boy ate quickly, hungrily, as if he were devouring more than food: memories, hope, the faint possibility of trust. The doctor watched, feeling a weight settle on his chest, familiar and foreign all at once. He had seen hunger before, desperation in the eyes of patients, but this was different. It was personal. He remembered the sterile smell of the clinic, the smell of antiseptic and fear. The quiet hopelessness of parents told their children wouldn't survive. Now, a child sat before him, raw, unshielded, and he felt his own grief twist tighter in his chest. Eli looked up once, mouth full, eyes shining. You always cook like this?" he asked. The doctor's lips twitched. "Not really," he said, voice flat. "Sometimes." He returned to his plate, silently monitoring the boy. The fork clinked against the plate as Eli ate faster, cheeks flushed with warmth or shame, the kitchen quiet again, except for the stove and the boy's quick, uneven breaths. Where did you sleep before?" the doctor asked between bites. "Outside," Eli said, voice soft. "In the barn, on hay." He shivered, rubbing his arms. "The wind, it bites." The doctor didn't reply, simply watched him. He had thought he wanted solitude, the emptiness of his own home, but now he realized the silence without another presence was hollow. He could feel it in the creaking floorboards, in the shadows gathering at the corners. The house had held secrets, memories, quiet sorrow, but now it had a heartbeat again, small and fragile, beneath the table where the boy ate. "You're not supposed to be here," the doctor said, more quietly this time. He didn't know if he was trying to convince Eli or himself. The boy's fork stilled. I can't just leave," Eli whispered. "Ain't got anywhere else." The doctor's hands clenched briefly in the space between stirring and serving. He wanted to argue. He wanted to return to his silence, his solitude. Instead, he placed another spoonful of grits on Eli's plate. The boy's small hands reached out, shaking slightly, taking the food again. His eyes held a weight that made the doctor's chest tighten. He looked at Eli at the raw, exposed hope, and he knew he couldn't send him away. Not tonight. Not ever. If he could help it. The house had shifted, the quiet replaced by this fragile presence. The walls, steeped in memory, seemed to watch, silent witnesses to the first tentative connection. By the time Eli finished, the plate empty, the boy curled his legs beneath him, leaning back in the chair with a small, exhausted sigh. The doctor remained standing, hands on the counter, watching him. He wanted to tell him to leave. He wanted to reclaim the emptiness he had lost, but he didn't. The boy's eyes, wide and vulnerable, met his, and he felt the weight of something he had thought impossible. Responsibility, care, a chance to be more than the grief that had defined him for so long. The first meal was over, but nothing had returned to silence. Not yet. Not ever. A hard knock rattled the door, sharp enough to make the doctor flinch. He had been sitting with a notebook, half finished, recording minor patient visits, but the sound pulled him upright. He moved to the door cautiously, peering through the small window. A broad figure stood on the porch, hat pulled low, boots planted firmly in the dirt. The sheriff. The doctor hesitated, hand resting on the doorknob. "Evening," the sheriff said, voice flat, heavy with suspicion. "Doctor, you keeping strays now?" His eyes scanned the porch, the house, lingering on the faint shape of a boy crouched behind the doorway. The doctor stepped aside, letting him in, tone clipped. "He's just a patient." The sheriff's gaze flicked to Eli immediately. The boy shrank back slightly, clutching the doctor's sleeve, small fingers tight around the fabric. "Patient, huh?" the sheriff said, stepping inside, boots creaking on the worn floorboards. "Patients don't call you Dad." The words hit sharper than the last verdict, echoing through the quiet kitchen. Eli's grip on the sleeve tightened, eyes wide, frozen. The doctor said nothing, setting down the kettle he had been tending, hands steady but tense. "Where'd he come from?" the sheriff pressed, voice low, dangerous. The doctor shrugged, calm but firm. "Found him outside. Needed help. That's all." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Outside, huh? You know his parents died under strange circumstances." He let the words hang in the air, heavy and accusing. Eli's body trembled slightly, as if the statement carried weight beyond comprehension. "Strange how?" the doctor asked slowly, trying to sound neutral, but his voice held steel. The sheriff leaned closer, lowering his hat further over his brow. "Mysterious accidents, town whispers, folks talk." He paused, letting the tension build. "You sure you want to involve yourself with that?" The boy flinched, head down, hiding behind the doctor's leg. "They can't touch me," Eli whispered, voice faint. "Don't let them." The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder, firm. "I won't," he said, eyes locked on the sheriff. The sheriff moved around the room, glancing at the walls, the faded photographs, the small, creaking furniture. He stopped by the window, looking out at the dim street, the fog rolling low. "This town," he said, voice almost a growl. "It's got rules. Children like him, they don't survive alone. Not for long. And men like you don't interfere." He turned sharply, eyes on the doctor again. "You keep him here, you're asking for trouble. And trouble has a way of finding men who stick their noses where they don't belong." The boy whimpered softly, clutching tighter. "I'm not leaving," he said, small, trembling. The doctor crouched slightly, voice low and steady. "You won't have to," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever, if I can help it." The sheriff snorted, a sound like gravel shifting. "You're soft. That boy, he's trouble wrapped in skin. You know it, I know it. This town doesn't forgive, and it sure as hell doesn't forget." He straightened, stepping toward the door. "I'll be back." His eyes, cold and calculating, lingered a moment longer on Eli, on the doctor, before he turned and exited, door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Eli sank to the floor, still clutching the doctor's sleeve, shaking slightly. "He'll come back?" Eli asked, voice barely audible. The doctor crouched beside him, placing a hand over his small, trembling one. "Yes," he said quietly, "but we'll be ready." Eli's breathing slowed, still shallow, as the warmth of the hand reassured him. The kitchen felt smaller now, tighter, filled with a tension that lingered even as the sheriff's boots receded into the night. The doctor stood, moving to the window, looking out at the dim, empty road. The fog drifted low, swallowing the outlines of houses and the few lanterns still burning. He thought of the boy's parents, of whispered stories of their deaths, of the rumors that had built like a slow storm over the years. He thought of the sheriff, the way he had looked, the warning implicit in his words, and he thought of Eli, curled on the floor, fragile, alone except for him. A protective urge stirred, one stronger than fear or caution. The silence of the house, once comforting, now felt different, alive, with anticipation, with danger waiting just beyond the walls. Eli spoke again, soft, almost inaudible. "I don't want him to take me away." The doctor's hand tightened briefly over his. "He won't," he said. "Not if I can stop him." He crouched, bringing his face closer to the boy's. "You stay here, safe, with me." Eli nodded slowly, trusting, uncertain, but willing to believe it. The night pressed in through the window. But inside, the house had a heartbeat again, tense and fragile, ready to face what came next. Eli shivered on the floor beside the fire, his small body trembling as sweat formed on his pale forehead. The doctor noticed immediately, the color of his skin uneven under the dim lamp, lips cracked, eyes glassy. "Eli," he said sharply, voice cutting through the quiet room. "Sit up. You're burning." The boy moaned, half raising himself, collapsing back into the blankets. "Don't feel good," he whispered, voice hoarse, body shaking. The doctor knelt beside him, taking his wrist, pulse racing, weak. He grabbed a cloth, wet it with cold water, and pressed it to the boy's brow. "Stay still," he ordered, hand firm on Eli's arm. The child's eyes fluttered, half closed, haunted by the heat and weakness. "Doctor," Eli croaked, barely audible. "Don't leave me." The words landed, cutting sharper than any knife. The doctor's jaw tightened. "I won't," he said, voice low but steady, gripping the child's wrist as if he could anchor him to the world. Sweat dripped from the boy's hairline, soaking the blanket beneath him. He took a deep breath, trying to push panic aside, forcing his hands to move with precision. Taking the thermometer, checking vitals, preparing a small dose of medicine. Everything in him screamed fear, not just for the boy, but for the fragile bond forming between them. He remembered the sterile white walls of his clinic, the smell of antiseptic and fear, the papers delivering life and death. His own infertility diagnosis flashed in his mind, cold and cruel, the words he had locked away. Never a father. Now the boy's life balanced in his hands, and he felt that grief as if it had grown roots inside his chest. "Drink this," he said, holding a cup of warm water and medicine to Eli's lips. The boy tilted his head, swallowing slowly, coughing once, then drinking again. The doctor pressed the back of his hand gently against the child's neck, checking for fever, listening to the uneven, rapid breaths. You're strong, he said, trying to keep his voice calm, repeating it until it sounded true, until he believed it. You'll get through this. Eli's eyes half opened, glassy, and he whispered, "Pain hurts." The doctor nodded, acknowledging the truth in the simplest way he could. "I know," he said. "I know it does." He wet another cloth, pressed it to the boy's forehead again, gently rubbing it across the flushed skin. Hours passed. The night pressed in, heavy, the wind scratching against the windows, the faint creak of the old floorboards marking the slow passage of time. The boy's breathing faltered, shallow and fast. The doctor refused to leave his side, moving the blankets, adjusting pillows, murmuring reassurances he hoped the fever would carry to him. "Don't give up," he whispered repeatedly. "Stay with me. You hear me?" Eli's hand twitched in his, holding the doctor's as if it were a lifeline. "I'm here," he said firmly, voice tight with fear and resolve. "I'm not going anywhere." The memory of his own diagnosis returned sharply, words on a sheet of paper in a sterile room. He had never imagined this. Someone else depending on him. Someone's life resting in his hands. Someone's small heartbeat tied to his own. He clenched his jaw, forcing panic back into the shadows. Forcing hands to work with care, coaxing the boy's body to cooperate with medicine, water, and warmth. He whispered over and over, "You're safe. You're strong. Don't leave me." The boy's eyes flickered, recognition and trust glimmering through fevered haze. By dawn, the fever began to break. Eli's breathing slowed, deep and more even, eyelids drooping in exhaustion. The doctor stayed at his side, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands still resting lightly on the boy's wrist, not moving, unwilling to let go. The small chest rose and fell, steadying, fragile. Outside, the first light of morning seeped through the curtains, weak and pale, brushing the worn floors and walls with a quiet, neutral warmth. He didn't speak, didn't move, only watched, hand still on the wrist, aware of every shallow inhale, every small movement. The boy survived the night. That was enough, Eli whispered once more, weakly. "Still here." The doctor tightened his grip gently. "Still here," he said, voice soft now, but firm, unwavering. He felt the weight of relief and fear mingled together, sitting heavy in his chest. His own grief and longing, locked away for years, now mingled with the pulse of the child beside him. The quiet house held them both, haunted by past losses and present fragility, but alive again with something stubborn, something protective, something human. He didn't move. He didn't speak again. He just kept his hand on Eli's wrist, watching, breathing with the small, fragile rhythm of life he had vowed to guard. The candle flickered in the small kitchen, casting long, wavering shadows across the walls. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, eyes fixed on the tiny flame as if it held answers. The doctor leaned against the counter, silent at first, letting the boy find the words in his own time. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the lamp and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Finally, Eli spoke, voice low, hesitant. "They said, my daddy stole land." The words were brittle, almost breaking as they left his lips. The doctor's eyes narrowed. "Who said?" he asked, voice controlled, but sharp, demanding clarity. "The sheriff, the banker, everyone," Eli said, shoulders trembling. They hung him. Right there, in the square. People watched. They cheered. His hands clutched the edges of the blanket around him, knuckles white. The doctor felt something tighten in his chest, a surge of heat, sharp and bitter. Anger, raw and immediate, coiling in the pit of his stomach. He stepped closer, kneeling beside the boy, voice low but firm. "Eli, I'm here. Listen to me. That was wrong. You didn't do anything. Your father, your mother, they deserved better. They left me," Eli whispered, eyes glassy. "I was alone. Nobody. Nobody came. He pressed closer, leaning into the doctor's side as if seeking shelter from a storm that had never ended. The doctor's jaw clenched. He wanted to tear through the memory, through the town, through the county, and retrieve what had been stolen, what had been taken. But he couldn't. Not yet. All he could do was listen, hold the boy, let the story flow like poisoned water from a well long buried. They said if I spoke, I'd end up the same, Eli said, voice trembling. So I ran, hid in barns, hid in fields. No one wanted me. Everyone, afraid. The doctor placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, firm, grounding. I won't let anyone hurt you, he said, voice low, hard. No one, not here, not now. You're safe. Eli's eyes flicked up, glassy, searching for truth in the lines of the man who had taken him in. Promise, he whispered. Promise you won't leave me. The doctor's chest tightened. He gripped the boy's small hands in his own. I promise, he said. I won't leave. Ever. The story spilled out in fragments, broken sentences, and short bursts. Mama, she tried to hide me. They came anyway. The rope, the square, the crowd, laughing. His voice caught, and the doctor pulled him closer. It's not your fault, he said, repeating it until it sounded true, until he believed it. Nothing you did made them cruel. Nothing. Eli shivered, leaning against him, a small, fragile weight, carrying a history the boy should never have known. The doctor thought of the sheriff's warning, of the bank's cold power, of the silent complicity of townsfolk. Rage simmered beneath his calm exterior, hot and ready to boil over. He clenched his fists, forcing the feeling down, holding it steady, aware that Eli's trust depended on restraint, on presence, on protection. Every syllable the boy spoke was a dagger into the county's hypocrisy, into generations of greed and cruelty wrapped around land, titles, and shallow respectability. They buried Mama out back. No one came, just dirt and me. Dirt on my hands, tears on my face. Nobody cared, Eli said, voice breaking, whispering so soft it might have been the wind in the trees outside. The doctor felt a tightness in his throat, a visceral ache. He wanted to scream at the empty sky, at the injustice stitched into the town's memory-soaked streets. But instead, he tightened his hold on the boy and whispered assurances. I care, he said. I see you. I hear you. You're not alone anymore. Eli leaned forward, forehead resting briefly on the doctor's chest. They said if anyone helped me, I'd disappear. Like them. Like Daddy. The doctor's grip on his shoulders became firmer, protective, immovable. Not here, he said firmly. Not under this roof. Not while I'm alive. The boy's small body shivered, exhaustion from grief and memory combing through his thin frame. The doctor felt a fierce, protective warmth spread through him, mingled with the anger at the county's unspoken cruelty. He traced a gentle finger along Eli's arm. I won't leave, he repeated, each word heavy, a vow, a shield. Eli's eyes, wide and glassy, met his. Promise, he whispered again, fragile, tentative, searching. The doctor nodded, pressing the promise into the silence of the candlelit kitchen, letting the flame flicker across walls that had held centuries of secrets and sorrow. I promise, he said, no matter what. You're not alone. The boy exhaled, small and shaky, curling slightly against him. The night pressed in outside, heavy with fog and the low moan of wind. Inside, in the fragile circle of candlelight, two lives tethered together against the past, against the memory of cruelty, against the silence of a town that had nearly swallowed them both. The church smelled of old wood, dust, and the faint lingering of incense burned weeks ago. Sunlight streaked through cracked stained glass, falling in pale rectangles on the worn pews. The congregation murmured softly, voices blending in hymns of routine and reverence. The doctor strode down the aisle, boots sharp against the wood, eyes locked on the preacher at the pulpit. Eli waited outside, pressed against the frame of the doorway, small body tense, listening, silent. The sermon continued, unaware, until the doctor's voice cut through the air, blunt, piercing. You blessed their execution. Head snapped around. Silence fell like a heavy stone. The preacher's face tightened, a flicker of irritation masked by practiced calm. Justice was done, the preacher said, voice even, measured, like a knife hidden beneath cloth. His eyes swept the congregation briefly, then back to the doctor, controlled, unyielding. The doctor took a step closer, leaning slightly forward, voice low but sharp. Justice, or profit. The words hung in the air. Congregants shifted uneasily, whispers rising, eyes darting between the two men. Some mouths opened and closed, unwilling or afraid to speak. The preacher's jaw flexed, hands gripping the pulpit. The law is the law, he said. Slow, deliberate, they transgressed. Consequences followed. God's will, God's will. The doctor shot back, teeth clenched, voice rising. You saw them hang. You spoke blessings, and the town cheered while 2 innocent lives were stolen. That's your justice. A few members murmured, some looking away, uncomfortable. Eli, just outside, pressed his small hands over his ears, trembling slightly, heart pounding. The wind brushed the church doors, rattling the hinges. He could hear the sharp tension, feel it even without seeing, his pulse echoing the anger inside the doctor's voice. The preacher's gaze hardened. You threaten the peace of this town, doctor. Speak carefully. His tone was calm, but the underlying weight was unmistakable. Peace, built on fear and obedience, is still peace. I serve a higher order. The doctor's fists tightened at his sides, knuckles pale. Higher order, or higher profit? How many benefited from their deaths while their child was left alone to rot in barns? The words cut through the wooden walls, into the dust and the echoes of old prayers. Some congregants stiffened. One woman gasped, hand covering her mouth. I've heard enough, the preacher said, voice rising slightly. You bring your accusations here, to my sanctuary, and claim righteousness. You know nothing of the burdens I carry. The doctor shook his head, stepping closer, anger raw, sharp. I know enough. I know the boy outside has suffered because of your blessings. I know you looked the other way when greed and cruelty took lives. I know you were there. The preacher's hands clenched the edges of the pulpit. Enough, he barked. Silence followed, thick and trembling. The congregation held its breath, eyes wide, the air heavy with judgment and fear. The doctor turned, boots echoing, leaving the pews behind, leaving the preacher with the weight of unspoken truths. Eli stepped just inside the doorway, peering cautiously. The boy's eyes were wide, chest rising and falling rapidly. The doctor's hand lingered on the small of his back, a protective anchor. Outside, the wind rustled leaves, carrying distant church bells in slow, uneven tolls. They walked quietly toward the edge of the churchyard, eyes forward, hearts still racing from confrontation. As the doctor passed, he felt the preacher's gaze burn into his back, sharp, calculating. The man leaned toward the sheriff standing nearby, whispering just loud enough for them both to hear. He's dangerous now. The words hung in the shadows like a threat, a warning to those who would try to challenge the balance of the town. The sheriff nodded, expression unreadable, hands resting lightly on his belt. The doctor didn't look back. He kept walking, eyes forward, aware that the town had just shifted, subtly, irreversibly. Because of the confrontation, Eli's small hand found the doctor's, gripping tightly, voice barely audible. Was that safe? The doctor gave a faint nod, voice low and steady. Safe enough, he said, for now. But remember, this truth is dangerous, and people fear it. That's why we have to hold on to each other. Eli leaned slightly into him, feeling the warmth, the protection, the quiet promise that had begun the night he arrived. The church doors loomed behind them. Silent, the interior emptied of the doctor's anger and the boy's presence, but heavy with whispered truths and looming threats. Outside, the air carried the smell of wet earth and distant wood smoke. The two moved forward together, a fragile bond solidifying against the weight of the town's secrets, against the memory of parents lost and innocence stolen. Each step echoed softly across the yard, carrying defiance, care, and the quiet knowledge that some things would never be forgiven, and some would never be forgotten. Night pressed against the windows like a living thing. The doctor moved quietly, checking the shutters, the lock on the door, aware that Eli slept on the floor nearby, wrapped in a thin blanket. Then the sound came: boots on the porch, firm and unyielding, heavy with authority. The doctor stiffened, moving toward the window, eyes narrowing at the shapes of men illuminated by lanterns swaying in the wind. The sheriff and 2 deputies. They knocked hard, almost breaking the wood. "Open up," the sheriff called, voice sharp, commanding, cutting through the quiet of the night. The doctor straightened, stepping toward the door, hands hovering over the latch. "Give me the boy," the sheriff said as soon as the door creaked open. His eyes burned with authority, a promise of violence hidden beneath calm. The doctor's jaw clenched. "Not tonight," he said, tone firm, deliberate. The sheriff's hand twitched near his hip, fingers brushing the butt of his revolver. "You're risking your license, your life," he said, voice low but lethal. The doctor didn't flinch. "I don't care about my license," he said, hands steady. "You're not taking him." The deputies shifted slightly, hands on guns, faces unreadable, tense. Eli stirred behind the doctor, small and silent, pressed against his back, his arms wrapped around the man's waist, seeking protection. "I'm right here," the doctor whispered, glancing down at the boy before meeting the sheriff's cold stare again. "He stays." The sheriff stepped closer, boots scraping against the old wooden floor. "You think defiance protects him?" His hand rested briefly on the revolver, a silent threat. "Think again. One wrong move, and it won't matter if you're a doctor or a fool." The doctor's hands tightened into fists. "Try me," he said quietly. A tense silence followed. Outside, wind rattled the shutters, leaves scraped against the walls, and the faint sound of a distant dog barking carried across the empty streets. The sheriff's eyes flicked to Eli, to the small, trembling figure pressed against the doctor. "Hide all you want," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Tomorrow, he's mine." The deputies shifted, murmuring softly, eyes never leaving the boy. One whispered, "We should just," but the sheriff cut him off with a hard glance. "Do as I say. Tonight, nothing. Tomorrow, we take him." The doctor squared his shoulders, breathing steady, aware of the fear in the room, but refusing to let it control him. "Then tomorrow, be ready," he said, voice cold, hard, "because he's not leaving. Not with you." Eli peeked around his waist, small eyes wide, trusting, terrified. The sheriff's mouth tightened. He leaned slightly closer, voice dropping to a whisper meant for no one else. "Dangerous now. Don't forget that." The doctor's gaze did not waver. He let the words settle in the air, thick and heavy. Before stepping slightly back, the deputies shifted again, one hand brushing the revolver, the other clenched in the air. The sheriff gave a slow nod, stepping back toward the door. "Tonight," he said, louder this time, "he stays. But no, this I'll be back." The doctor held his stance, watching the dark forms retreat down the path, lanterns bobbing in the night. The tension didn't leave immediately. He kept his eyes on the door, hand brushing the small of Eli's back, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his chest. Eli whispered, voice trembling, Was he going to hurt us?" The doctor shook his head, keeping tone calm but firm. Not tonight. But you have to stay close, always. Understand? The boy nodded quickly, shivering slightly, clinging tighter. The doctor adjusted the blanket around him, keeping the small frame pressed against him. No one gets him, he said again, low, almost a vow. Not while I'm here. Not while I live. The house settled into a tense quiet again, the echoes of the confrontation lingering in the walls, in the shadows, in the corners where the wind pressed against the old structure. Eli shifted slightly, still pressed close, eyelids heavy, but eyes wide and alert. The doctor remained where he was, hand firm on the boy, listening to every sound outside, the distant scrape of lanterns, the faint shuffle of boots fading, the whisper of wind through the trees. The night was alive with threat, but inside, the small circle of protection held. The sheriff's warning echoed in the doctor's mind. Tomorrow, he's mine. The words burned, a promise of danger to come. Yet the doctor felt the pulse of defiance rise, strong, steady. They would face it together. Eli safe, alive, and for now, protected. The quiet house absorbed the tension, waiting, heavy with anticipation. Shadows dancing over walls and floorboards as the two held each other against the threat of the outside world. The house was silent, except for the soft creak of the floorboards beneath the doctor's boots. Moonlight spilled through cracked window panes, slashing the room into uneven rectangles of light and shadow. He paced, restless, fists clenched, mind spinning with the sheriff's words, the threat hanging like smoke in the night air. Each knock, each warning echoed in his chest. Tomorrow, he's mine. The words felt like iron bands tightening around his chest, yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of resolve glimmered. Eli's small, trusting face haunted him, fragile, frightened, alone. The boy stirred from the corner, wrapped in blankets, eyes wide in the dim light. You're thinking, Eli said softly, voice almost a whisper. You're scared. The doctor stopped pacing, turning to him, jaw tight. I am scared, he admitted, voice low, strained, almost swallowed by the shadows. Eli shuffled closer, small hands brushing the doctor's coat. You don't have to be. You can leave. You can run. The doctor shook his head, stepping toward him. You're not my son, he said, tone deliberate, trying to mask the swell of emotions threatening to break through. You're all I got, Eli said, immediately. Unwavering eyes locked on the man. No one else. Just you. The words struck like lightning, leaving a raw ache in the doctor's chest. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the soft sigh of wind through the cracked windows. The doctor's shoulders sagged slightly, hands releasing tension, jaw loosening as emotion cracked through. Then you are, he said finally, voice breaking but firm, a vow solidifying in the quiet house. Eli blinked, a flicker of hope and relief in his eyes, and pressed closer, small body leaning for comfort. The doctor left the room briefly, climbing the narrow stairs to the attic. Dust hung in the air, thick, tasting of old wood and forgotten years. He opened a creaking chest, revealing a hunting rifle long stored, its surface dulled by time. He ran a careful hand over the stock, eyes narrowing, mind calculating. This was no longer a home for gentle care. It was a line in the sand. Every shadow outside, every whistle of the wind against the siding could be the sheriff, the deputies, the town's power ready to strike. But Eli's life mattered more than caution, more than law, more than the quiet respectability he had once clung to as a doctor. He tested the rifle, checking the mechanism, the weight, the balance. Each motion precise, deliberate. The memory of the sheriff's boots on the porch, the harsh words demanding the boy, replayed in his mind. Give me the boy, the voice had said. The doctor's jaw clenched, hands steady now. He loaded the rifle carefully, feeling the weight of the decision settle over him. It was more than a weapon. It was a promise, A declaration. They would not take Eli, not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. Eli appeared at the top of the attic stairs, small shadow framed against the stairwell. What? What are you doing? He asked, voice hesitant, almost afraid of the answer. The doctor lowered the rifle slightly, looking down at the boy, eyes serious, voice soft but unwavering. Preparing, he said, for what comes. I won't let them take you. Eli's eyes widened, fear mixing with trust. But, guns, they'll hurt you. The doctor shook his head. No, they'll hurt them if they try. You won't be hurt. Not while I'm here. The boy shifted, hands clasped together, voice almost breaking. I don't want you hurt. I can't lose you too. The doctor's chest tightened. The weight of past grief, the diagnosis, the loneliness he had carried alone, pressing into the present. He knelt briefly, resting a hand on Eli's shoulder. You won't, he said firmly, tone carrying both promise and defiance. I've failed at nothing else in life, but I will not fail you. Not now. Not ever. Eli leaned slightly into him, small, fragile, trembling. And the doctor felt the last shred of doubt begin to harden into resolve. The attic smelled of old wood, dust, and iron from the rifle. Moonlight slanted through the small window, illuminating the man and boy, two shapes poised on the edge of change. The doctor stood, eyes scanning the horizon beyond the house, imagining the sheriff and deputies moving through shadows, lanterns bobbing. They would come. But now, he was ready. Heart steady, mind clear, hands firm around the weapon that carried the weight of protection, vengeance, and the bond between him and the boy. Eli watched, quiet eyes bright and wary. You really mean it? He asked softly. You'll fight. The doctor's mouth tightened into a grim line. I will, he said, tone unwavering, voice carrying the promise like a lifeline. For you. For both of us. No one will take you, not the town, not the sheriff, not anyone. The boy nodded, small fingers brushing the rifle stock in tentative acknowledgement. They understood each other now. The fear was still there, palpable, but it had sharpened into purpose, into readiness, into defiance against those who believed power could take what was never theirs to claim. The doctor adjusted the rifle once more, shoulders squared, eyes forward. The attic held them both, silent witnesses to the quiet transformation of a man who had once believed in measured restraint, now steeling himself to protect what mattered at any cost. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and twisted, as if anticipating the confrontation to come. Outside, the wind whispered through trees and old wood, carrying the faint scent of danger, of law, of inevitability. Inside, the man and boy prepared together, tethered by promise, by choice, by survival. He lowered the rifle slowly, checking the chamber, the trigger, the sight. Tomorrow, he whispered, more to himself than to Eli. Tomorrow, we fight. The boy's small hand found his again, squeezing tightly. I'm not going anywhere, he said. The doctor nodded, voice low, steady, absolute. Neither am I. The quiet of the attic held them, a fragile peace, heavy with anticipation, ready for the storm they both knew was coming. The ruins of the boy's old family home stretched before them, charred beams jutting from blackened earth, roof long collapsed, walls scarred with memory and fire. Smoke lingered, curling thinly in the night air. The doctor led Eli carefully, eyes scanning the darkness, hands firm on the boy's shoulders. Stay close, he whispered. Every step. Eli nodded, small and tense, gripping the man's coat. The wind carried the faint scent of old wood and ash, the ghosts of a home and life that had been stolen. The night was alive with shadows. A sudden shout cut through the silence. That boy's blood don't belong here. The sheriff stepped from behind a fallen beam, lanterns swinging in the wind, deputies at his side, eyes hard, guns glinting. The doctor froze, then squared his shoulders, voice cold, sharp. Then neither does yours. Eli pressed closer, fear in his chest, arms tight around the man's waist. The sheriff's face twisted into a sneer. You think you can hide him here? You think these ashes protect him? The doctor shook his head slowly, eyes never leaving the men. I'm not hiding. I'm protecting. That's your choice, not mine. Torches flared as the deputies advanced slightly, eyes scanning the ruins. The doctor's hands went to the rifle slung over his shoulder. Step back, he said quietly, but there was no hesitation, no wavering in the voice. The sheriff laughed harshly, a sound that echoed off the crumbling walls. You're a fool, doctor, and a dead man if you fire. He raised his hand, signaling the deputies, raising their weapons. Eli whimpered, clutching the man's leg. Don't, he whispered. Please don't. The doctor knelt briefly, brushing the boy's hair from his face. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. Not here. Not ever. The first shot rang out, echoing like thunder against the ruins. The doctor ducked, returning fire, sharp and precise. Wood splintered near them, sparks flying. Eli screamed, pressed to the ground as flames from the torches licked the edges of the scorched walls. Smoke stung eyes, filled lungs, and the acrid smell of fire clung to skin and hair. The sheriff moved closer, calling orders, voice carrying over the chaos. Circle them. Don't let them escape. The doctor pivoted, moving behind a fallen beam, rifle steady. Eli, stay low, he said, voice calm amidst chaos. Trust me. Bullets kicked up dirt, sending shards into the blackened earth. Eli's small hands gripped the doctor's sleeve, heart hammering. They're going to kill us, he cried. The doctor shook his head, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the sheriff, who advanced too fast, reckless in anger. Not if I can help it. Keep low. Don't move unless I tell you. Another shot, closer this time, and a splinter of wood struck near Eli. The boy screamed, voice raw, tears streaking dirt-streaked cheeks. The doctor returned fire, steady, his body moving instinctively, trained, desperate. The flames climbed higher, feeding on the dry remnants of the home. Shadows twisted across the ground, mixing with smoke and terror. The sheriff yelled, advancing fury in every step. You think this boy belongs to you? You're stealing him from his destiny. The doctor didn't flinch, voice low and lethal. He belongs to no one who would harm him. That includes you. A volley of bullets tore across the ruins, and the doctor dove forward, rifle steady, each shot precise, cutting the distance between them. Eli screamed again as fire licked the edges of a fallen wall, heat pressing close. The doctor grabbed him, dragging him behind a sturdy stone foundation, chest heaving. I've got you, he said, tone sharp, a promise sharper than any bullet. I won't let go. The sheriff approached too close, shouting, guns waving. This is your last chance. The doctor's finger tightened on the trigger. No, this is my first warning. He fired, and the sheriff stumbled, hit in the shoulder, weight pitching forward onto scorched earth. Blood mixed with dirt, sliding down his face. He spat, muttering curses, crawling on hands and knees, anger mixing with pain. Eli's small hand clutched the man's arm, shaking. Is he? The doctor's gaze never wavered from the sheriff, breath steady, despite the heat, the smoke, the chaos. He's alive, he said, but he's out of the fight. The boy exhaled shakily, relief mixing with terror. Flames crackled around them, wind carrying embers into the night sky, sparks floating like tiny stars above the ruined home. The doctor rose slowly, rifle steady, eyes scanning the shadows, aware of every movement, every threat. The sheriff coughed, blood mixing with ash, voice raw. This isn't over, he rasped. The doctor's voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of iron and promise. It is tonight. You leave now, or the next time, it ends differently. Remember that. The deputies glanced at him, uncertainty creeping into their posture. One whispered softly, almost to himself, "He's dangerous." The doctor's eyes didn't flicker. "Dangerous for those who threaten what's rightfully protected," he said, tone low. Final. Eli clung to his side, voice shaking. "They'll come back." The doctor nodded, sweeping a hand across the ruins, firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Yes, but not tonight. Tonight, we survived. And tomorrow, we prepare again. But they won't take you. Not while I'm here." The boy shivered, leaning against him, tears streaking soot-stained cheeks, but eyes bright with trust. The doctor felt the bond tighten, unbreakable now, forged in fire, blood, and defiance. Smoke curled upward, carrying the scent of ash, gunpowder, and wet dirt. The ruins, once home and then grave, now stood as witness to defiance and survival. The sheriff crawled in the dirt, spitting blood, fury and fear mingling in every strained movement. The doctor didn't lower his weapon, not for a second. Eli held his hand tightly, small fingers gripping, drawing strength from the man who had chosen to fight for him against the world, against law, against vengeance. The fire's glow faded slightly as wind shifted, carrying the echoes of the battle into the night. Silence returned, tense and fragile. The doctor knelt briefly beside Eli, checking the boy's shaking hands, brushing soot from his hair. "We're safe," he whispered, though both knew this night would echo in memory forever. Eli nodded, shivering but leaning closer. The ruins smoked quietly, a monument to what had been lost and what they had gained: survival, defiance, and the beginning of a bond that could not be broken, even by fire or fear. The air reeked of smoke and gunpowder, thick and clinging, as the sheriff lay sprawled in the dirt, blood streaking the ruins around him. The doctor knelt beside the man, hands steady, despite the heat, the smell, the weight of everything that had just happened. Eli's small hand clutched his coat, trembling, eyes wide and unblinking. He's not moving," the boy whispered, voice trembling. The doctor's gaze remained fixed on the sheriff's bloodied face, jaw tight, mind racing through every shot fired, every command ignored, every line drawn in fire and ash. The sheriff coughed once, weak, rasping eyes barely open. "You think you saved him?" The voice came, raw, strained, cutting through the smoke. "You just doomed him." The doctor's hand pressed harder against the man's shoulder, eyes narrowing. "Lies," he said sharply, voice low but carrying. "You're wrong." The sheriff coughed again, blood flecking his lips. "This town don't forgive bastards, or those who take what's theirs." His voice faded slightly, ragged and hollow. The doctor's grip tightened, heart hammering, but he didn't speak. He knew the man was close to the edge, teetering between breath and nothing, and that silence was all that could hold the moment together. Eli pressed closer, small body trembling. "He's going to die, isn't he?" The doctor shook his head, voice quiet, almost a whisper for the boy's ears alone. "He's dying, yes, but listen, we're still here. You're still here." The boy's hand found the doctor's, squeezing tightly. "I don't want him to hurt you," Eli said, voice raw with fear. "You've already risked everything." The doctor exhaled slowly, eyes still on the sheriff, every muscle tense. "I've risked what matters," he said, tone measured, "and I'll do it again, if I must. But I won't leave you." The sheriff coughed, weakly, raising a bloodied hand toward the doctor. "You can't. Stop it," he rasped. "Curse runs deeper than bullets, than fire. Deeper than you think." The doctor's hand froze for a fraction, pulse tightening. "What curse?" he asked, voice low, controlled, but curiosity and fear laced his words. The sheriff's eyes flickered toward Eli, shadowed and unfocused, and he whispered, "It waits in the bloodlines. The land. Don't think this ends." His hand fell limply, eyes closing finally, a final shudder rolling through his body. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the crackle of dying embers around the ruins. Eli's breath caught, small shoulders trembling. He's gone. The doctor nodded slowly, standing, hands still clutching the boys as they turned from the corpse sprawled in the ash. The ruins felt different now, quieter, though danger still lurked in every shadow, every charred beam. "Yes," he said softly, tone firm and grounding, "but we're still here. That's what matters." Eli's eyes searched his face, trusting, needing, holding on. "Will they come back?" The doctor shook his head slowly, brushing soot from the boy's hair. "They might, but we're not hiding. Not anymore. We face what comes together." He lifted Eli carefully, small frame light in his arms, but heavy with the weight of what had been endured, and began moving through the smoke, ash falling like snow around them. Every step was cautious, deliberate, aware of the fire-scorched ground and the silence that stretched beyond the ruins. The boy's head rested briefly against his shoulder, breath shaky, but growing steadier. I don't want to be afraid," Eli whispered, voice small, but earnest. The doctor adjusted his hold, eyes scanning shadows beyond the ruined walls. "You don't have to be. Not while I'm here. Fear doesn't belong to us anymore. It belongs to them, to the town, to the curse, but not to us." The ground sloped downward, leading to the old family graveyard. He carried Eli across uneven dirt, roots and stones pressing underfoot, smoke curling around them in ghostly tendrils. The gravestones loomed ahead, worn and memory-soaked, names etched faintly in the dying light. The doctor lowered Eli gently to the ground beside the two graves, small hands brushing the earth, tentative, reverent. "Your parents," he said softly, voice low, carrying the weight of grief and protection alike. "They're here. We're here. You're not alone." Eli's eyes filled, tears mingling with ash on cheeks, small fingers tracing letters worn with time. I thought I'd never see this place again," he whispered. I thought I'd never have anyone." The doctor crouched beside him, hand brushing Eli's hair from his face. "You have me now," he said firmly, tone steady, resolute. "And I'm not going anywhere. Not ever." Eli leaned into him, small body trembling but seeking safety, and the doctor felt the bond between them solidify, forged in fire, blood, and survival. Silence stretched around them, broken only by the faint crackle of dying embers, the whisper of wind through broken trees, and the quiet settling of ash onto earth that had long been a witness to pain and loss. Eli's voice broke softly. Do you think the curse is still out there?" The doctor shook his head slowly, eyes scanning the horizon, mind calculating, heart steady. "It may be," he admitted quietly, "but it doesn't matter. Because we're here, because we survived, and because we know how to fight, together." The boy's small hand found his again, squeezing tightly. "I don't want to be alone anymore," he said, tone earnest, vulnerable. "You promised?" The doctor's lips tightened in a small, solemn line. "I promised. And a promise like that doesn't break." They remained there, huddled together beside the gravestones, the night around them heavy with smoke, memory, and the weight of a curse that stretched through blood and land. But for now, in that small patch of earth, two souls clung to each other, alive, determined, unbroken. The sheriff lay defeated, the ruins smoldered, and the boy's small frame rested against the man who had chosen to protect him, against a world that had tried to take him. Here, in the quiet aftermath, with grief and fire lingering, they found something stronger than fear, something lasting, trust, survival, and the beginning of a life rebuilt from ashes. The sun rose slow and low, casting a muted light over the ruins, the charred earth, and the ash-strewn road. Smoke still curled in thin spirals from the remnants of the home, catching in the early beams, twisting and fading into the pale morning sky. Eli stirred, small body curled against the doctor, limbs stiff from the night spent on hard ground. He blinked, voice barely more than a breath. "Dad." The single word hung between them, fragile and heavy, cutting through the weight of loss and fire like a sliver of something holy. The doctor froze, every muscle tight, chest constricting. He felt the word press against his rib cage, a truth he had avoided, feared, and yet longed for. His eyes filled, hot and blinding, and he swallowed, voice barely a whisper, trembling with years of silence and pain. "Yes, son." The boy's face brightened, uncertain at first. Then relief and wonder shining through tears, small shoulders sagging as though he had carried that word alone for a lifetime. The doctor's hand found the boy's, gripping tightly, warmth returning to his fingers, the trembling in his chest easing slightly. They rose slowly, the doctor steadying Eli with an arm across his back, guiding him down the dirt road, away from the ruins. Each step sank slightly in the ash and loose soil, each footfall a reminder of the night's terror and the battles fought. "We're leaving it behind," the doctor said quietly, tone low but firm. "All of it, every lie, every shadow, every fire. It stays here." Eli leaned into him, small fingers curled around his sleeve, voice soft. Will they come?" Again. The doctor shook his head, eyes scanning the horizon where smoke lingered like a ghost. "Not if we don't let them. Not while we stay together." The road stretched ahead, dusty and uneven, bordered by fields that had once been green but now were scarred, flattened by neglect and memory. The boy's steps were hesitant, faltering, but he held the doctor's hand tightly, drawing courage from the strength beside him. "I'm scared," Eli admitted quietly, voice trembling, small teeth clenching. The doctor glanced down at him, expression solemn, softening. "That's okay. Fear doesn't make you weak. Fear makes you alive. And alive, we survive." The boy nodded, little head tilting, eyes shining with trust. They passed the remnants of the fence that once marked the yard, posts blackened and leaning, wire twisted into strange knots. The doctor kept a steady pace, scanning shadows and wind-swept corners, aware of how fragile safety could feel, how easily it could be ripped away. "Do you remember your parents' grave?" he asked quietly. Eli's small hand tightened. "Yes," he whispered. "I remember." The doctor nodded. "Then that memory is ours too. No one can take that." The boy exhaled slowly, small shoulders easing, the first hint of a smile breaking through tears and ash. They walked in silence for a stretch, letting the road carry them forward, sunlight warming their backs. The air was fresh, carrying faint scents of dry earth, grass, and lingering smoke. The doctor's mind replayed every shot, every scream, every threat from the sheriff, every heartbeat spent holding Eli close. Yet here, in the morning calm, he felt the weight lift slightly, the tension easing, replaced with something fragile and hard-won, hope. The boy's small hand tugged gently. "Dad, will you stay?" The question was simple, unassuming, but it carried the weight of years, the fear of loss, and the trust of a lifetime condensed into one word. "Yes," the doctor said softly, almost a vow. "I'll stay, always." Eli's grip tightened, face pressed briefly against his side, small body shaking slightly with relief. The road continued, winding through empty fields, broken trees, and scorched remnants of the past. Behind them, the ruins smoldered, darkened timbers, sticking from the earth like blackened fingers, pointing at what had been lost. Yet the doctor did not look back. He only walked forward, Eli at his side, each step grounding them both in the present, in survival, in the bond forged in fire and blood. The boy spoke again, small and hesitant. "You really mean it?" The doctor glanced down, eyes meeting Eli's warm and steady. "Every word. You are mine to protect, and I am yours." Eli's lips quivered, a mixture of tears and the faintest hint of laughter. Then, "I'm glad I found you." The doctor's chest tightened, throat tight, and he swallowed, voice almost breaking. "I'm glad you found me too. More than anything." The road stretched endlessly, dust rising in small clouds with each step. Birds began to stir, wings flapping in the distance, the first sound of life beyond ash and ruin. The boy's small hand squeezed his father's, fingers curling tighter, drawing reassurance, safety, and belonging from the one who had taken him in when no one else would. "I thought I'd never have a dad," Eli whispered. "I thought I'd always be alone." The doctor's gaze softened, hand brushing ash from the boy's hair. "Not anymore," he said quietly. "Never alone again." As they crested the small hill, the sun fully rising, the ruined land stretched behind them, blackened and scarred, fire split and memory soaked. The shadows of the past lingered, but they did not touch the boy or the man walking hand in hand toward what remained of the wider world. Silence stretched around them, heavy but solemn, carrying the weight of what had been endured, survived, and survived again. No words were needed to mark the passage of pain into something new, something stronger. Eli's hands stayed in his, small fingers entwined, and the doctor's grip never faltered. The word had been spoken, the bond affirmed. "Dad," Eli murmured. Again, softer this time, a comfort and a promise rolled into a single syllable. The doctor's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes glistening, and he nodded. "Yes, son, I am." They continued down the dirt road, each step firm, measured, toward whatever lay beyond the ashes. Behind them, the blackened ruins stood silent, witness, but in front of them, life waited, fragile, precious, and finally unbroken.